The tension in Judge Judy's courtroom always feels different from any other courtroom you've ever seen. It isn't just the oak benches, the flags in the background, or the sharp echo of the gavel that makes it intimidating. It's the presence of Judge Judith Scheindlin herself. She doesn't tolerate nonsense, excuses, or disrespect. And everyone who enters that courtroom, from the audience members to the bailiff bird, knows the golden rule: you do not interrupt Judge Judy. Ever. But one young man, full of arrogance and misplaced confidence, didn't seem to get the memo. The cameras rolled, the audience hushed, and Judge Judy entered with her usual brisk stride. Her robe swayed just slightly as she took her seat, her sharp eyes already scanning the papers in front of her. On her right sat the plaintiff, a middle-aged woman with a stiff posture, her lips pressed tightly together. On her left sat the defendant, the man who was about to make one of the worst mistakes of his life. He leaned back in his chair like he was lounging at home, his arms folded across his chest. He smirked occasionally, glancing at the cameras as if this was his personal show. His body language screamed one thing: he wasn't taking this seriously. Judge Judy wasted no time. "Plaintiff, state your case." The woman immediately launched into her complaint. She claimed the man owed her money for damages after a botched car repair. Her voice trembled slightly, not because she lacked confidence, but because she knew what kind of man she was dealing with. She explained how she had trusted him, how he promised he knew what he was doing, and how his careless work left her car in worse condition than before. Judge Judy listened intently, her face unreadable. She scribbled a note on her pad, then looked up with her trademark sharp glare. "Defendant, your response?" The man leaned forward, puffing his chest out as though preparing for a boxing match rather than a legal proceeding. "First of all," he began, his tone dripping with disdain, "this whole thing is ridiculous. She's lying. She didn't pay me what she said she would, and now she's trying to blame me for her car problems. None of this is my fault." His words were loud, his tone dismissive. He rolled his eyes dramatically, then gave a small laugh as though the case was a joke. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Even Bird, the bailiff, raised an eyebrow. Judge Judy remained calm, but her eyes narrowed. "Sir," she said firmly, "you'll get your chance to respond. Don't interrupt while the plaintiff is speaking." At that moment, the defendant made his fatal mistake. As soon as the plaintiff resumed her explanation, the man cut her off mid-sentence. "That's not true," he barked, leaning forward in his chair. "She's twisting everything." The plaintiff froze, startled, while Judge Judy's pen stopped mid-stroke. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a knife. Judge Judy slowly turned her gaze to the defendant. Her eyes locked on him like a hawk zeroing in on prey. "Do not interrupt me," she said in a low, icy voice. But instead of backing down, the man chuckled again, shaking his head like she had just told a bad joke. Gasps rippled through the small courtroom audience. Everyone there knew this wasn't just arrogance. This was suicide in Judge Judy's courtroom. The cameras zoomed in on Judy's face, capturing the flicker of fire in her eyes. She set her pen down, leaned slightly forward, and spoke with a controlled fury that made the room feel 10 degrees colder. "Sir, this is not your living room. You don't talk over me, and you don't talk over the plaintiff. This is my courtroom. Do you understand that?" The defendant shrugged casually, clearly trying to mask his growing discomfort. "Yeah, whatever," he muttered under his breath. Bird shifted in his spot, ready for whatever came next. The audience could sense it. The plaintiff could sense it. And deep down, the defendant probably could too. He had just lit the fuse. The thing about Judge Judy is simple: she has spent decades cutting through lies, arrogance, and disrespect. She has faced every type of personality imaginable, from smooth talkers to loudmouths to professional manipulators. But no matter how they came in, they all learned the same painful truth: when you try to play games in her courtroom, you don't win. You don't even survive. And this man, who thought he could laugh, roll his eyes, and talk over her, was seconds away from discovering exactly what being destroyed looks like, Judge Judy style. The silence that followed his careless whatever was heavy, and for a moment, the entire courtroom seemed frozen in time. Judge Judy tilted her head ever so slightly, the kind of subtle movement that anyone familiar with her show knew was a warning sign. She wasn't just annoyed. She was preparing to strike. "Let me explain something to you," she began, her tone calm but charged with authority. "This is not a debate club. This is not a game. You are in a courtroom, and when I ask a question, you answer it. You don't laugh, you don't roll your eyes, and you don't disrespect me or this process. Do we understand each other?" The defendant leaned back in his chair and smirked again, but his eyes darted nervously for just a second. He muttered, "I get it," but it was obvious he didn't mean it. The plaintiff continued her story, carefully outlining how the defendant's supposed repair had cost her more money and left her without a working vehicle for weeks. But once again, before she could finish her sentence, the defendant cut her off. "She's lying. I told her from the start it wasn't my fault if her car was already trash. She's making me look bad because she doesn't want to admit she didn't maintain it." This time, Judge Judy slammed her pen down so hard the sound echoed. The audience flinched. Berg glanced at the defendant with a look that almost said, "You better stop now, or you're done." "Are you thick?" Judge Judy snapped, her voice suddenly sharp. "I just told you not to interrupt. Do you think you're smarter than me? Do you think I can't see through you?" The smirk on the defendant's face finally began to falter. His mouth opened slightly, but he didn't know what to say. The room was no longer under his control. Every eye was on him, and none of them were sympathetic. Judge Judy leaned forward, staring him down. "You may be used to talking over people in your everyday life, but not here. Not with me. When you're in my courtroom, you follow my rules. And right now, you're making yourself look like a fool." The plaintiff, who had been sitting stiffly, allowed herself the faintest smile. It wasn't gloating, it was relief. For the first time in the case, she wasn't the one being bulldozed by his arrogance. But Judy wasn't finished. She turned her attention back to the man, flipping through the papers in front of her. "I have the receipts here. I have the photographs of the car before and after you touched it. I don't need your interruptions, I need facts. And so far, all I'm getting from you is hot air and disrespect. Do you have evidence to prove that you're not responsible for this damage?" The defendant hesitated. He shifted in his chair, his arms unfolding from across his chest. For the first time since the case started, his confidence cracked. "Well, I didn't take pictures, but..." Judy pounced. "But nothing. If you're so sure she's lying, where's your proof? Where's the documentation? Where's the written agreement, the photographs, anything? Or do you think you can just come in here, flap your gums, and expect me to take your word over hers?" The man sputtered, looking from Judy to the plaintiff and back again. His voice was lower now, less steady. "I didn't think I'd need all that. I thought..." "You thought wrong," Judy interrupted, her voice cutting like a knife. "You thought you could bluff your way through this. You thought you could laugh and talk over me, and maybe I'd let you get away with it. Let me be very clear, you are not going to win this case by being loud. You win cases with evidence, with facts, and with respect. You have none of those things." The audience murmured in agreement. Even Berg gave a subtle shake of his head, as if to say, "This guy is finished." The defendant tried one last time to salvage his dignity. "She's exaggerating. She always exaggerates. I swear she's just making it up." Judge Judy leaned back, folded her arms, and stared at him with that piercing look that had silenced countless people before him. "Sir, the only person exaggerating here is you. You exaggerated your skills, you exaggerated your professionalism, and now you're exaggerating your defense. And I don't tolerate exaggerations in this courtroom. You can sit there with your smug little grin, but let me assure you, when I'm done with you, there won't be anything left to grin about." The defendant blinked rapidly, trying to keep up. His cocky mask was slipping. What he didn't realize was that he hadn't just annoyed Judge Judy, he had challenged her authority. And that was a fight no one had ever won. The plaintiff sat back, her case finally being heard in full, while the defendant squirmed in his chair. The courtroom was quiet except for Judy's voice, sharp and commanding. The destruction had already begun, and the man was powerless to stop it. By this point, the defendant's confidence had withered. The swagger he carried into the courtroom was gone, replaced by darting eyes and restless hands. He tapped his fingers on the table nervously, trying to appear calm but failing miserably under Judy's stare. She picked up the photographs again, holding them up so both the plaintiff and the cameras could see. "This is the car before you touched it," she said firmly. "And this is the car after you claimed to fix it. Anyone with eyes can see the difference. It doesn't take a mechanic to figure out that you caused damage." The man leaned forward, desperate now. "That's not fair. Those pictures don't show everything. She probably messed it up after I gave it back to her just so she could blame me." The courtroom erupted in soft laughter at his flimsy excuse. Berg didn't even try to hide his smirk. Judge Judy slammed the photos back onto her desk. The sound was like a final gavel strike before the actual judgment. "Stop talking," she snapped. "Just stop. Do you think I've never heard that excuse before? You think you're the first genius to sit in that chair and claim the other person sabotaged their own property just to frame you? Let me tell you something, sir, you're not original, you're not clever, and you're certainly not convincing." The defendant's face flushed red. He tried to recover, his voice trembling as he spoke. "I'm telling the truth. She's..." "Quiet." Judy's voice thundered across the room. "I've had enough of your interruptions. You've talked over the plaintiff, you've tried to talk over me, and now you're making excuses without a shred of evidence. You are done." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. The plaintiff glanced at the judge with relief, while the audience leaned forward, anticipating the final blow. Judy lowered her voice, making it colder, sharper. "Here's what I see: a woman who trusted you to do a job you weren't qualified to do. You took her money, you made the situation worse, and now you're standing here with nothing but arrogance and empty words. That's not a defense, it's an embarrassment." The man's mouth opened, but no words came out. His bravado had evaporated. For the first time, he looked small. Judy pointed her finger at him, her tone measured but devastating. "I don't like liars. I don't like people who waste my time. And I especially don't like people who think they can come into my courtroom and behave as if they're above the rules. You're not above anything. You're under judgment. My judgment." The audience clapped lightly, quickly silenced by Bird, but the message was clear. Everyone in that room knew the man had been utterly defeated. The plaintiff straightened her shoulders, finally feeling vindicated. She didn't need to argue anymore. Judge Judy had already done the heavy lifting. The defendant sat back in his chair, avoiding the cameras now. His smirk was gone, his confidence shattered. All that remained was the reality he couldn't escape. He had walked into Judge Judy's courtroom thinking he could play the role of the tough guy, but within minutes, she had torn him down, piece by piece. And the final judgment hadn't even been delivered yet. The room had grown so quiet that even the faint hum of the cameras seemed loud. The defendant, who had walked in smirking as if he owned the place, now slumped in his chair like a schoolboy caught cheating on an exam. His arms, once confidently crossed, now hung limp at his sides. Judge Judy took one last look at the papers before her, then set them aside. She didn't need them anymore. She had seen enough. "This is not complicated," she said with calm authority. "You were trusted with a job you weren't capable of doing. You took her money, you damaged her property, and now you have wasted this court's time with your arrogance. You owe her for the repairs, and you're going to pay." The defendant's lips parted as though he wanted to argue, but before a sound could escape, Judy raised her hand like a stop sign. Don't say a word. You've said enough already. And every word you've spoken has only dug you deeper. You should consider yourself lucky that all I'm ordering today is restitution. If I had the power to fine people for stupidity, you'd owe a fortune." The audience burst into laughter, quickly stifled by Bird's deep order in the court. The plaintiff allowed herself a small, satisfied grin. The defendant shook his head in disbelief, whispering something under his breath, but Judy caught it instantly. Her eyes locked on him again, sharper than before. What was that? Speak up. No? Then let me say it for you, you lost. And you didn't just lose the case, you lost your dignity the second you thought you could outtalk me in my own courtroom. The man sank deeper into his chair, his bravado crushed completely. His silence said more than any excuse he could have made. Judge Judy turned her attention back to the plaintiff, her tone softening just slightly. Judgment in favor of the plaintiff for the full amount. She banged her gavel once, the sound final and absolute. The case was over. The plaintiff exhaled in relief, her shoulders finally relaxing after weeks of stress. Berg stepped forward to signal the end of the proceedings, while the defendant lingered in his chair, still trying to process the humiliation he had just endured. As the cameras zoomed out, capturing the aftermath, the lesson was crystal clear. You can walk into Judge Judy's courtroom with arrogance. You can try to interrupt her, laugh at her, even roll your eyes. But the second you cross that line, the second you test her authority, you're finished. And this man had learned it the hard way. He had thought he could control the room, but instead, he was dismantled piece by piece until nothing was left but silence and defeat. Seconds after he interrupted Judge Judy, he was destroyed.